The Vulcan ship screamed into Terran space at a velocity that tore the void asunder, sending shockwaves reverberating through subspace and nearly overloading the sensors of the TSS Endeavour as Captain Johnny Henry gaped in disbelief at the readings. No spacecraft should be able to move at such insane physics-defying speeds. The Vulcan vessel was but a blur as it streaked past, its passage ripping open the fabric of local space-time in a dazzling display of exotic energies. Johnny's hands flew across the control console, the ship's AI racing to track the intruder. Only Johnny's razor-sharp reflexes allowed the Endeavour to whip around in time to catch up. "Vulcan ship, this is Captain Johnny Henry of the TSS Endeavour. You have violated Terran sovereign territory. Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded." Static crackled over the comms. "Repeat, cut your damn engines now." The Vulcan scout ship rapidly decelerated, exotic drive still glowing ominously as it came to a relative stop. "Terran vessel, this is Captain Solaris of the Vulcan Expeditionary Forces. Our ship has sustained damage. We request emergency docking and repairs." Johnny narrowed his eyes, considering. The Vulcans were not to be trusted. Not after the bloody skirmishes along the border, the clandestine raids on remote human outposts. Starfleet Command had standing orders to treat any Vulcan military craft as hostile. The smart move would be to keep the scout at a distance with weapon lock and alert the nearest Terran battle group. But the Vulcans were proud. They would never fake damage as a ruse, would they? What if their ship had suffered a genuine malfunction and Johnny condemned them to a slow death in the void by refusing aid? The Vulcan High Command would certainly use that as a pretext for war. Against his better judgment, Johnny sighed and opened the comms again. "Permission to dock granted, but if this is a trick—" Soon the two ships were coupled, umbilicals and docking clamps linking them. Johnny and a security team stood in the airlock with weapons drawn as the pressure equalized with a hiss. The hatch slid open, revealing the Vulcan in the flickering light. Captain Solaris was lean and stern-faced, with upswept brows and pointed ears. His right arm hung limp at his side, emerald blood oozing from a gash. "Our scout ship was caught at the edge of a subspace anomaly," Solaris said, voice tight with pain. "The engines and control systems are damaged. I must interface with your ship's computer to access navigational data and star charts." A sense of unease prickled down Johnny's spine. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He gestured curtly with his weapon. "My engineers will assist with repairs, but any attempt to access restricted systems will be met with lethal force." Solaris inclined his head. "Understood." The ship's computers were linked, and data flowed between them as Johnny watched the transfer intently on a monitor, finger hovering over the cut-off switch, gut clenched. Time seemed to dilate. Then a new file path blinked on screen for a microsecond, gone in a flash. Classified Terran R&D files, propulsion systems, D. Rage exploded behind Johnny's eyes. He stabbed the button and whirled on Solaris, grabbing the Vulcan by the collar and slamming him against the bulkhead. "You green-blooded son of a bitch, you're trying to steal our damn engine schematics." "Your species is advancing too quickly," Solaris snarled, facade cracking. "Your ships already eclipse ours in speed and firepower. It's only a matter of time before you warlike apes turn your greed and bloodlust on us. We needed weapons to defend ourselves." Johnny's mind reeled as Solaris ranted about secret Vulcan plans, preemptive strikes, invading fleets that would bomb human colonies back to the Stone Age. The Endeavour's engines hummed, impossibly fast and powerful, the innocent-looking machines that could carry death to Vulcan worlds with terrible swiftness if Earth struck first. Two peoples, each mistrustful and afraid, convinced the other would seize the advantage, a recipe for mutually assured destruction, unless someone, somehow, broke the cycle. But on the sensors, new contact screamed into local space. Sensors showed unclassified signals, Vulcan frequencies, reinforcements to block any transmissions, to keep humanity unaware of the imminent danger. Before confronting Solaris or hailing these new ships, Johnny had two priorities: protect the Endeavour's secrets, and somehow get a warning to Terran High Command, to buy time for humanity's survival against all odds, even if he and his ship had to be sacrificed. The stakes were no less than extinction, and in the shadows, a third power watched, waited, with goals that could overturn the balance of the galaxy. Captain Johnny Henry's mind raced as he processed the shocking revelation of the Vulcan plot against humanity. There was no time to lose. He spun on his heel and jabbed a finger at his first officer, Commander Jack Reynolds. "Jack, get that Vulcan bastard Solaris into the brig, now, and put a security detail on their scout ship. No one goes in or out without my express authorization." Reynolds nodded curtly. "Aye, sir." He gestured to two burly security officers, who promptly grabbed Solaris by the arms and hauled him away, the Vulcan's protests falling on deaf ears. Johnny strode onto the bridge, his face set in a mask of purpose. "Lieutenant Thompson, get me a secure channel to Terran Space Fleet Command. Priority 1, encrypt with our most advanced protocols." "Yes, Captain," Thompson replied, his fingers already flying across the communications console. Johnny composed his message quickly but thoroughly, outlining the Vulcan threat and the urgent need for reinforcements at key human colonies. He transmitted the encrypted data burst, hoping it would reach HQ in time. As he waited for a response, a chime from the sensor station caught Johnny's attention. His heart sank as he saw the readings. "Captain, long-range sensors have detected a massive Vulcan battle fleet just beyond our border," the sensor officer reported, her voice tight with tension. "Hundreds of ships, sir. They outgun us by an order of magnitude." Johnny clenched his fists, his mind racing. The Endeavour couldn't hope to stand against such overwhelming force, and reinforcements were too far away. He had to buy time somehow. An idea formed, a desperate gamble. "Thompson, open a channel to the Vulcan fleet. Broadcast a looped message claiming that a Terran armada is en route to intercept them. Make it look authentic." Thompson looked uncertain but followed the order. "Aye, sir, broadcasting now." "Chen." Johnny turned to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Alex Chen. "Work with engineering. Modify our sensor profile to mimic the signatures of multiple human battleships. We need to sell this bluff." Johnny plotted a course directly towards the Vulcan fleet, a bold move that he hoped would unnerve them. Vulcans were logical to a fault. They wouldn't risk a costly engagement if they believed a superior force was bearing down on them. But his relief was short-lived. Alarms blared as a sleek predatory shape emerged from the void, a Vulcan stealth frigate that had somehow evaded their sensors. It launched a salvo of shimmering quantum torpedoes, the deadly projectiles streaking towards the Endeavour. "Evasive maneuvers," Johnny shouted, gripping the arms of his command chair as the ship shuddered under the impact, shields barely holding. The Vulcan frigate closed in, its superior technology evident in its speed and firepower. They were outmatched, and the enemy knew it. Chen complied, and a barrage of explosions blossomed along the frigate's aft section, the ship reeling drunkenly as its engines failed. "Get us out of here, maximum warp," Johnny ordered, not waiting to see if the frigate would recover. The Endeavour leaped to FTL speeds, leaving the crippled Vulcan ship behind. As the adrenaline faded, Johnny slumped in his chair, his mind turning. This was just the beginning, he realized, a prelude to the full-scale war that loomed on the horizon. He had to get back to Earth, to help plan humanity's defense. But first he needed answers from Solaris, answers that might just provide the key to his people's survival. Johnny pushed himself to his feet, squaring his shoulders as he strode towards the brig. He would get the truth from Solaris one way or another. But even as he walked the corridors of his battered ship, Johnny couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was watching, pulling strings from the shadows. An unknown player with an agenda that could tip the balance of the coming conflict. And deep in the void, a cloaked figure observed the Endeavour's limping flight, a smile playing across alien features as it contemplated the chaos to come. Johnny strode into the brig, his boots echoing off the metal floor. Solaris sat in the cell, back straight, eyes forward. The Vulcan's stoic facade cracked as Johnny approached, revealing a flicker of apprehension. "Let's cut the bullshit, Solaris. What's the endgame here? Johnny demanded, slamming his palm against the force field. Solaris flinched, then sighed. You wouldn't understand, human. Your kind advances too quickly. We had to act. By stealing our tech, planning an invasion, Johnny pressed. It goes beyond that, Solaris admitted. We've constructed a weapon, one capable of destroying entire planets. Johnny's blood ran cold. And where? A fortified base on one of our moons. We call it the Logician's Nightmare. Without another word, Johnny spun on his heel and rushed to the bridge. He punched in the codes for a secure channel to Terran Space Fleet Command. This is Captain Henry. I have intel on a Vulcan superweapon, requesting permission for an infiltration mission to neutralize the threat. There was a pause, then, permission granted, Captain. Codename Prometheus Rising. We're sending you reinforcements. Special Forces, led by Sergeant Frank O'Reilly. Godspeed. As the Endeavour raced towards the Vulcan moon, the ship buzzed with activity. In engineering, Bob Wilkins cursed as he fused Vulcan tech into human systems. This better work, he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. Meanwhile, Dr. Tanaka administered combat stims to the crew. This'll keep you sharp, he said, pressing the hypo spray to Johnny's neck. The Endeavour dropped out of warp near the moon. Johnny led the Special Forces team to the airlock, their stealth suits humming with power. Let's move, Johnny whispered as they breached the base's outer defenses. They crept through dimly lit corridors, disabling security nodes and dodging patrols. As they neared the weapons chamber, alarms blared. Vulcan guards poured in, energy weapons blazing. Johnny and his team dove for cover. O'Reilly, Johnny shouted over the din. Take your men and push to the superweapon. I'll hold them here. The sergeant nodded, leading his team deeper into the facility as Johnny laid down covering fire. Johnny's armor took hit after hit as he fought off waves of Vulcan soldiers. His muscles screamed, but he pressed on, knowing the fate of Earth hung in the balance. In the heart of the base, O'Reilly's team reached the Logician's Nightmare. They worked quickly, planting antimatter charges around its core. Charges set, O'Reilly barked into his comm. Captain, what's your status? Static crackled, then Johnny's strained voice. Pinned down, surrounded. O'Reilly cursed. Alpha team, with me, we're getting the captain. Beta team, make for the extraction point, draw them off. The base shook as the charges began to detonate. Johnny stumbled through smoke-filled corridors, his armor in tatters. He rounded a corner to find O'Reilly and his men fighting towards him. Time to go, sir, O'Reilly shouted, tossing Johnny a weapon. They fought their way to a Vulcan shuttle, the base crumbling around them. Johnny threw himself into the pilot's seat, punching the throttle as the last of the team clambered aboard. The shuttle rocketed away from the moon as it erupted in a massive fireball. Johnny sagged in his chair, exhaustion overtaking him as the Endeavour came into view. As Earth loomed large in the viewscreen, Johnny couldn't shake a gnawing feeling of unease. They'd won the battle, but at what cost? And what of the shadowy third player, whose presence he'd sensed throughout the conflict? Johnny clenched his fists. Whatever came next, he'd be ready. The Endeavour limped back to Earth, her hull scorched and battered. As the ship touched down on the landing pad, Captain Johnny Henry felt the weight of their mission pressing down on him. His crew stumbled out, faces haggard but triumphant. No sooner had Johnny's boots hit the tarmac than he was whisked away to a secure briefing room deep within Terran Space Fleet Command. Admiral Zhao, a stern-faced woman with steel-grey hair, sat at the head of the table. Captain Henry, your mission was a success. The destruction of the Vulcan superweapon has bought us time, Zhao said, her voice tight. But I'm afraid it's not over. Johnny's stomach dropped as intelligence reports flashed across the screen. Vulcan ships massing near human colonies, supply lines being fortified. They're preparing for a full-scale invasion, Johnny muttered, the implications sinking in. Admiral Zhao nodded grimly. Which is why Earth's leadership has made a decision. We strike first at the heart of Vulcan space. Within days, a massive human battle group assembled in orbit. Johnny stood on the bridge of the newly refitted Endeavour, marveling at the upgrades. His trusted crew took their stations, Chen at tactical, Thompson at comms, Reynolds as his XO. As the fleet jumped to warp, Johnny addressed his crew. "What we're about to do will determine the fate of our species. Stay sharp, stay focused." They dropped out of warp on the edge of Vulcan space. Immediately, alarms blared. "Massive Vulcan fleet detected," Chen shouted. "They were waiting for us." The void erupted in weapons fire. Human and Vulcan ships clashed in a titanic battle. The Endeavour shuddered as it took hit after hit. "Shields at 60%, Reynolds called out. Johnny gripped his chair. "It's now or never. Activate the slipstream drive." The ship's reactor whined as it channeled unimaginable power. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then reality itself seemed to tear. A blinding flash engulfed the Endeavour. When it faded, Johnny's jaw dropped. They were moving faster than he thought possible, the stars blurring around them. As quickly as it began, it was over. The Endeavour snapped back to normal space. In their wake, a wave of exotic particles washed over the Vulcan fleet. One by one, their warp signatures winked out. "Their drives are offline," Chen reported, a note of awe in his voice. "All ships, open fire," Johnny ordered. The human fleet unleashed hell upon the crippled Vulcan armada. Explosions bloomed silently in the void, as ship after ship succumbed to the onslaught. On the main viewer, a transmission appeared. A Vulcan elder, his face ashen. "We surrender," he said simply. "Cease fire." In the days that followed, an uneasy peace settled over both species. But as Johnny watched the Vulcan prisoners being processed, a chill ran down his spine. Solaris was nowhere to be found. "Sir," Reynolds approached, his voice low, "there's something else. We've detected anomalous energy readings, not Vulcan or human in origin. It's as if someone else has been watching this whole time." Johnny's mind raced. What new threat lurked in the shadows? As he gazed out at the stars, he knew their journey was not nearly finished. The Endeavour would need to push deeper into uncharted space, seeking answers to questions they'd only begun to ask. Captain Johnny Henry stood on the bridge of the Endeavour, his eyes fixed on the swirling vortex of uncharted space before them. The ship's sensors pinged softly, tracking a faint subspace trail that led deeper into the cosmic unknown. "Steady as she goes, Lieutenant Thompson," Johnny ordered, his voice tight with tension. "Keep us on that trail." As they pushed further into the void, the stars grew sparser, replaced by roiling clouds of interstellar gas. Chen's voice cut through the eerie silence. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange on long-range scanners. It's massive." Johnny leaned forward, squinting at the readout. A cloaking field unlike anything he'd ever seen flickered at the edge of their sensor range. "Can you get a visual?" The main view screen flared to life, revealing a colossal shape that dwarfed the Endeavour. Its hull seemed to shift and bend, defying the laws of physics. "My God," Reynolds breathed. "Look at those energy readings. They're off the charts." Before Johnny could respond, the alien vessel decloaked. A blinding beam of energy lanced out, enveloping the Endeavour. "Evasive maneuver." Johnny's order died on his lips as consciousness slipped away. He awoke with a start, his head pounding. Johnny found himself sprawled on the deck of the Endeavour's bridge. As he struggled to his feet, he realized something was terribly wrong. The familiar hum of the ship's engines was gone, replaced by an alien thrum that vibrated through the hull. Johnny stumbled to the nearest viewport and froze. The Endeavour floated in a cavernous hangar bay, dwarfed by the sheer scale of the alien vessel that had captured them. Suddenly the bridge doors hissed open. Armed drones poured in, their weapons trained on the groggy human crew. Before anyone could react, the drones fired. Johnny felt a jolt of energy course through his body, and he collapsed, muscles spasming. When he regained control, Johnny found himself being roughly escorted through alien corridors. His bridge officers shuffled along beside him, their faces etched with fear and confusion. They were herded into a vast chamber that could only be the alien ship's nerve center. Johnny's jaw dropped as he took in the sight before him. towering figures encased in gleaming biomechanical suits stood arrayed around a central platform. One of the beings stepped forward, its voice booming with otherworldly resonance. "I am Altharal, commander of this vessel. We are the Celestials, guardians of galactic order." Johnny squared his shoulders, meeting Altharal's inscrutable gaze. "Why have you brought us here?" Altharal's next words sent a chill down Johnny's spine. "Your species has been under our observation since you first breached the warp barrier. We orchestrated your conflict with the Vulcans as a test." "A test?" Johnny sputtered, anger rising in his chest. "You manipulated us into war?" "Indeed," Altharal continued, unmoved. "But your use of the experimental slipstream drive has forced our hand. You've awakened something ancient and terrible." The Celestial Commander went on to explain about the Unmaker, a cosmic horror that threatened all of reality. Johnny listened with growing dread as Altharal detailed their plan to imprison humanity to stop the spread of corruption. "You can't do this," Johnny shouted, lunging at Altharal. The Celestial Guards moved to restrain him, and chaos erupted on the command deck. In the confusion, Johnny caught Reynolds' eye. His exo nodded almost imperceptibly before slipping away. Moments later, the deck lurched violently beneath their feet. Through the viewports, Johnny watched in horror as cracks spread through the fabric of subspace in their wake. The last thing he saw before the Endeavour shot beyond light speed was the look of abject terror on Altharal's alien face. The Endeavour lurched violently as it tore free from the celestial vessel's grasp. Captain Johnny Henry's stomach dropped as he watched reality itself fracture around them through the viewscreen. Fissures of blinding light split the void, bathing the bridge in an otherworldly glow. "Status report," Johnny barked, gripping his chair as the ship bucked and shuddered. Alarms blared, their shrill cry piercing through the chaos. Lieutenant Chen's fingers flew across his console, eyes wide with panic. "Captain, the slipstream wake is tearing holes in subspace. We're taking massive radiation damage." The deck plates groaned beneath their feet. Sparks erupted from overloaded consoles, filling the air with the acrid stench of burnt circuitry. Johnny felt the ship's frame shudder, threatening to tear itself apart. "Engineering, talk to me," Johnny shouted into the comm. Bob Wilkins' voice crackled through, tight with strain. "Captain, the slipstream drive's gone haywire. I can't shut it down." Johnny's blood ran cold as Wilkins continued. "The reactors are redlining. Antimatter containment's failing. We've got minutes at best before this ship turns into a giant bomb." Johnny's mind raced. They needed an out, fast. "Navigation, plot an emergency jump to the nearest habitable system. We need to get clear and attempt a full shutdown." "Aye, sir," Thompson acknowledged, her hands dancing across the controls. The warp drive hummed to life, its familiar vibration a stark contrast to the chaotic energies tearing at the ship. For a brief moment, Johnny dared to hope. That hope shattered as reality seemed to fold in on itself. The warp field collapsed, twisting into a vortex of impossible colors. Johnny watched in horror as a massive rift tore open before them, swallowing the Endeavour whole. "All hands brace for impact," Johnny roared, slamming the ship-wide comm as he strapped himself into the command chair. The universe turned inside out. Johnny's bones felt like they were trying to occupy the same space as his organs. His vision blurred, the bridge stretching and compressing in ways that made his mind scream in protest. When the violent motion finally ceased, Johnny's jaw dropped. Through the viewscreen he saw a realm of madness. Space folded in on itself, fractals of non-Euclidean geometry spinning off into infinity. Johnny watched in growing terror as Chen's body began to warp. The tactical officer's limbs stretched, his torso twisting like putty. All around the bridge, crew members cried out in agony as their physical forms rebelled against the laws of physics. A presence pressed against Johnny's mind, vast and incomprehensible. Images flooded his consciousness, shapes that hurt to look at, constantly shifting and unraveling. The Unmaker, its very existence an affront to reality. Whispers slithered through Johnny's thoughts, promises of power and transcendence if he'd only give in. Let go. Become one with the infinite. Johnny ground his teeth, focusing on the pain to anchor himself. Years of combat stress and rigorous mental conditioning allowed him to push back against the cosmic horror's influence, but only barely. "Captain," Reynolds' voice cut through the madness, "sensors show the rifts collapsing. We'll be trapped here if we don't move fast." Johnny's mind raced. There was only one way out, and it was a long shot at best. "Reynolds, Wilkins, route all remaining power to the slipstream drive. We need another shock to punch our way out." "Sir, that'll overload the reactors for sure," Wilkins protested. "Do it," Johnny ordered. "Everyone else get to the shuttle bay now." As the surviving crew scrambled to evacuate, Johnny turned to Reynolds and Wilkins. "I need you two to stay behind and trigger the drive manually. It's the only way to ensure the timing." Understanding dawned in their eyes. They nodded grimly, accepting the suicide mission without hesitation. Johnny clasped their shoulders. "It's been an honor serving with you both." Seconds ticked by like hours as Johnny helped the last of his crew into the shuttles. He spared one final glance at the twisted hellscape outside before sealing the airlock. A violent shudder rocked the ship. Johnny knew Reynolds had triggered the drive. Blinding light flooded the viewport as antimatter met matter in a cataclysmic explosion. The shuttles were violently ejected from the Endeavour as it tore through the dimensional barrier. Johnny's stomach lurched as they were hurled back into real space at impossible speeds. As his vision cleared, Johnny's blood ran cold. The sensors were going haywire, every direction bathed in otherworldly energy. The Unmaker had broken free. Tendrils of cosmic horror spread across the starfield, corrupting everything they touched. Earth's galaxy lay directly in its path. Johnny keyed the shuttle's comm, his voice steady despite the terror clawing at his chest. "All craft, prepare for immediate evacuation. I'm taking the Endeavour on one last run." Ignoring the protests of his crew, Johnny transferred back to the crippled starship. His fingers flew across the helm, plotting a course straight for the Unmaker's leading edge. He overrode every safety protocol, pushing the slipstream drive well beyond its limits. As the ship accelerated to relativistic speeds, Johnny allowed himself one final thought of home before reality twisted around him. The Endeavour screamed towards its target, a lance of human defiance against the encroaching void. The Endeavour screamed towards its target, a lance of human defiance against the encroaching cosmic horror. Johnny's hands flew across the controls, every fibre of his being focused on the task at hand. The ship shuddered violently as it tore through the dimensional rift, emerging into a nightmarish realm where reality itself seemed to bend and twist. Johnny's eyes widened as he beheld the true scope of their enemy. The Unmaker's presence unfurled across the starfield, a writhing mass of impossible geometries that hurt to look at. Its leading tendrils stretched across Earth's galaxy, a searing cosmic flare that threatened to consume everything in its path. With grim focus, he initiated the final sequence. Warning klaxons blared as he overrode every safety protocol, routing all power to the antimatter reactor. The deck plates vibrated beneath his feet as the reactor core pushed well beyond its limits. Johnny's fingers danced across the helm, aiming the Endeavour directly at the vanguard of the Unmaker's invasion. He took a deep breath, steadying himself for what was to come. "Slipstream drive engaged," the computer announced, its artificial voice eerily calm in the face of cosmic annihilation. The universe seemed to fold in on itself as the drive activated. Johnny felt a sickening lurch in his stomach as space-time contorted around the ship. Through the viewscreen, he watched reality fracture into a kaleidoscope of impossible colors and shifting fractals. Suddenly, a wave of psychic force slammed into Johnny's mind. He cried out in agony as alien thoughts clawed at his consciousness, threatening to shred his very sense of self. "No," Johnny growled through gritted teeth. "You don't get to win that easily." Fighting through the pain, he pushed the drive output even further. Sparks erupted from overloaded consoles as the ship's systems began to fail. Johnny could feel the Endeavour disintegrating around him, but he held firm to the controls. With a deafening crack that seemed to shake the very foundations of reality, the confluence of forces reached its peak. Johnny watched in awe as the Unmaker's tendril ground to a halt, caught in the frozen wake of the Endeavour's final jump. But victory came at a terrible price. Johnny felt his body twisting, changing, becoming something both more and less than human. He screamed as his consciousness expanded, stretching across time and space. In his last moments of linear existence, Johnny reached out with his mind. He poured every scrap of knowledge, every iota of tactical data into a desperate transmission to the fleeing shuttles. As his body transmuted into pure energy, Johnny infused the signal with the very essence of his being, a final gift to humanity. And then, stillness. Johnny found himself trapped at the focal point of the shear field, a timeless observer as eons passed in the blink of an eye. He watched impassively as humanity rose from the ashes of near destruction, forging mighty fleets and weapons of unimaginable power. Just as the sheer boundary began to decay, Johnny saw humanity's ultimate weapon unleashed. Star systems ignited in cataclysmic detonations, their combined fury severing the Unmaker's tendril moments before it could break free. As the shear collapsed, Johnny felt his essence scatter. His final thought, a spark of hope drifting into the cosmic void, was that perhaps humanity now stood a fighting chance against the horrors that lurked beyond the veil of reality. The evacuated shuttles streaked across the void, their engines straining as they pushed the limits of relativistic travel. Inside the lead craft, Lieutenant Chen's fingers flew across the controls, his eyes fixed on the swirling data streams pouring from Captain Johnny Henry's final transmission. "We're approaching the outer colonies," Chen announced, his voice tight with exhaustion. "Prepare for deceleration." As the shuttles slowed, a vast space station loomed before them. Its angular shape bristled with communication arrays and defense turrets. The refugees breathed a collective sigh of relief as they docked, the station's massive airlocks sealing shut behind them. Within hours, Johnny's data was uploaded to Earth's central strategic computer core. In the heart of humanity's last bastion, rows of quantum processors hummed to life, decoding the captain's final gift. Admiral Zhang stood before a holographic display, her face illuminated by streams of tactical projections. "Divert the 7th and 9th fleets to these coordinates," she ordered, gesturing to a cluster of star systems. "We need to fortify those defensive nodes immediately." Across the galaxy, massive warships engaged their drives, leaving trails of ionized particles in their wake. Space fortresses the size of small moons maneuvered into position, their weapons primed for the coming storm. On vulnerable colony worlds, panic spread like wildfire. Frantic civilians pushed and shoved, desperate to board the last departing transports. Children wailed as families were separated in the chaos. The lucky ones watched from viewport windows as their homes receded into the distance, while those left behind faced an uncertain fate. Yet even as humanity scrambled to defend itself, the Unmaker's influence seeped through the cracks of reality. On the frontier world of New Eden, colonists screamed as their bodies warped and twisted. Flesh melded with metal, limbs sprouted where none should exist. Minds shattered under the weight of cosmic horrors, never meant for mortal comprehension. In response to these outbreaks, cybernetically enhanced soldiers deployed from orbiting dropships. Their augmented bodies carried weaponry designed to combat threats beyond human understanding. At their head strode Sergeant Frank O'Reilly, his scarred face set in steadfast perseverance. "Praetorians!" O'Reilly's voice boomed through their neural links. "You've seen what we're up against. Now it's time to send these abominations back to hell." On the ice world of Thule, the Praetorians fought a desperate battle against the colony's corrupted inhabitants. Cultists with writhing metallic tendrils for arms charged forward, their once human mouths stretched impossibly wide as they screeched in alien tongues. O'Reilly's plasmacaster flared, vaporizing a group of cultists in a burst of superheated matter. "Keep pushing," he roared, leading his team through the frozen hellscape. Meanwhile, in a secret laboratory deep beneath Earth's surface, scientists pored over Captain Johnny's data. Dr. Amelia Chen, her eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights, input the final calculations into a shimmering holographic model. "We've done it," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and terror. "The zero-point reaction chambers. They're our best chance at fighting back." Across corrupted worlds, strike teams moved with surgical precision. They planted the chambers in strategic locations, each device a ticking time bomb of cosmic energy. When activated, the chambers erupted in blinding flashes of light. Reality itself seemed to scream as localized singularities tore open, dragging the Unmaker's tendrils back through dimensional barriers. For a moment, humanity dared to hope, but as the dust settled, the terrible truth became clear. The Unmaker's true form remained beyond their reach, growing stronger with each attack. Its consciousness expanded, threatening to transcend reality itself. In a secure war room, Earth's greatest minds gathered. Holographic displays flickered with increasingly dire projections. Admiral Zhang's face was etched with lines of exhaustion as she addressed the assembled strategists. "We've thrown everything we have at this thing," she said, her voice heavy. "And it's not enough. We need a new approach." A young scientist stepped forward, her hands shaking as she pulled up a complex series of equations. "There might be a way," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But the cost, it's unthinkable." As she explained the theoretical parameters for creating an artificial subspace vortex, the room fell silent. The implications were staggering, a chance to end the threat once and for all, but at a price that made even the most hardened veterans pale. Admiral Zhang closed her eyes, the weight of command settling heavily on her shoulders. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but firm. "Begin the preparations. May God have mercy on our souls." Admiral Zhang's eyes widened as the holographic display flickered to life, revealing the fruits of countless sleepless nights. The intricate web of equations and quantum mechanics that made up Captain Johnny Henry's final transmission coalesced into a single terrifying possibility. "An artificial subspace vortex," she breathed, her voice barely audible over the hum of the war room's systems. "It's our only shot at containing this thing." The assembled strategists leaned forward, their faces illuminated by the ghostly blue light of the holograms. Dr. Amelia Chen's fingers flew across her datapad, running simulations at a feverish pace. "The energy requirements are astronomical," she said, her brow furrowed. "But if we can pull it off, we might just be able to shove that cosmic horror back where it came from." Admiral Zhang nodded, her decision already made. "Initiate Operation Cosmic Singularity. I want every available resource diverted to this project immediately." As the orders went out, humanity's greatest minds threw themselves into the Herculean task. In a hidden asteroid field far from prying eyes, construction began on a marvel of engineering that defied conventional physics. Dr. Marcus Callahan stood before the half-finished stellarator array, its massive ring stretching out into the void. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he barked orders to the army of engineers and construction drones swarming around the structure. "Tighten those quantum confinement coils," he shouted, his voice crackling over the comm system. "If we're off by even a picometer, this whole thing goes up in our faces." As the stellarator took shape, humanity's defenders engaged in a deadly game of cat and mouse across the stars. Commander Jack Reynolds crouched behind a makeshift barricade on the surface of a nameless planetoid, plasma rifle clutched tightly to his chest. "Bravo team, flank left," he ordered, his voice steady despite the cacophony of battle around him. "We need to keep these bastards focused on us." The Praetorian strike teams moved with practiced precision, their augmented bodies pushing the limits of human endurance. Corrupted biomechanical horrors surged forward, their twisted forms a mockery of life itself. Reynolds popped up from cover, his rifle spitting superheated death. He watched with grim satisfaction as the monstrosities fell, their alien flesh sizzling and popping in the vacuum. "That's right," he muttered. "Come and get it, you cosmic son of a bitch." But even as Reynolds and his teams fought their bloody holding action, disaster struck elsewhere. On the colonial outpost of HFY, klaxons blared as reality itself began to unravel. "Haul civilians to the evac shuttles," Sergeant Elena Vasquez bellowed, herding terrified colonists towards the waiting transports. "Move it, people! We don't have much time!" The ground beneath their feet rippled and warped, impossible geometries tearing through the fabric of space-time. Colonists screamed as their bodies twisted, flesh melding with metal and stone in grotesque union. Vasquez fired her weapon on full auto, cutting down the advancing horde of mutated cultists. Their mouths gaped impossibly wide, howling in languages never meant for human tongues. "Class shuttles away," her second-in-command shouted over the din. "We need to bug out, Sarge." Vasquez nodded grimly, tossing a final grenade into the surging mass of corruption. As their dropship lifted off, she watched Atria 5 disappear beneath a writhing sea of cosmic horror. Back at the Stellarator array, alarm shrieked as the quantum gyros spun up to critical velocity. Dr. Callahan's fingers danced across the control panel, his eyes fixed on the readouts. "Containment fields holding steady," he reported, his voice tense. "Initiating primary singularity ignition now." A blinding flash erupted from the heart of the array, reality itself seeming to scream in protest. As the light faded, a pinprick of absolute darkness hung suspended at the center of the Stellarator, an infinitesimal naked singularity, the key to humanity's salvation. But the Unmaker was not idle. As the vortex began to form, its presence converged on the array site. Space itself buckled and tore as the entity's full might bore down upon them. "Psionic tendrils incoming," a technician shouted, panic evident in his voice. "They're targeting the fleet." Dr. Callahan watched in horror as entire space docks of human ships twisted and warped, their crews screaming in agony as they were transformed into biomechanical abominations. "We're out of time," he muttered, his fingers flying across the controls. With a deep breath, he activated the final sequence. Initiating cerebral imprint. God help us all. Across the fleet, specially prepared personnel stiffened as Johnny's fragmented consciousness flooded their minds. Their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light as they channeled the fallen captain's unbreakable spirit into the containment fields. The vortex yawned open, a gateway to realms beyond human comprehension. Dr. Callahan felt a moment of triumph before the Unmaker's full psychic might crashed down upon them. "It's trying to crush the singularity," he shouted, his hands a blur of motion across the controls. "Activating vortex anchor." With a final desperate command, Callahan unleashed the full fury of human ingenuity. The anti-vortex implosion erupted, dragging the Stellarator array, the Unmaker, and Callahan himself towards the gaping maw of the subspace portal. Across the vast distances of space, the remnants of Johnny's consciousness flared to life. His will, amplified through countless minds, slammed into the vortex boundaries. Reality itself groaned under the strain as Johnny's essence fought to keep the portal open against the Unmaker's relentless assault. The battered human fleets watched in awe as the vortex aperture expanded violently. In a blinding flash of hawking radiation and chrononuclear fury, the Stellarator array vanished, taking with it the Unmaker and humanity's last, desperate hope. As the cosmic light show faded, Admiral Zhang stared at the tiny discolored knot that hung in space, where the titanic battle had raged. Tears streamed down her face as she realized the enormity of their victory, and its cost. But even as cheers erupted across the comm channels, a junior officer approached with a datapad, clutched in trembling hands. Zhang's blood ran cold as she read the report from the long-range reconnaissance probes. Something vast and ancient stirred on the far side of the galaxy, awakened by the subspace vortex resonance. She looked up, her face pale. "What have we done?" You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.